My name is Martina Mayfield. I'm 28 years old, and I should have realized sooner that I was never Larry's partner. I was one of his assets. When we first met, Larry had this magnetic confidence that made everyone in the room lean closer. He was 29 sharp, suit crisp watch, always the loudest laugh at any dinner. I worked in HR for a small logistics company, quietly managing payroll spreadsheets while he was closing six-figure deals in pharmaceutical sales. He made more than double my salary, but that never bothered me. At least not at first. When he asked me to move into his downtown condo after 2 years of dating, it felt like a milestone. You'll save money. And I hate coming home to an empty place, he said, brushing my cheek like it was an afterthought. His condo was modern floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble counters, the kind of place where even the silence sounds expensive. He suggested I contribute $800 a month towards shared living costs. I thought that was generous. Rent in that area was easily twice as much. I just want things to feel fair, he said. It sounded noble then. But I'd soon learn that when Larry said fair, he really meant profitable for him. The first few months were smooth wine nights, Netflix trips to weekend markets. But slowly something shifted. He started keeping tabs on little things, how often I bought groceries, whether I filled up his Tesla after driving it, or how long I ran the hot shower. Once, when I brought home store-brand shampoo, he laughed. "Martina, you make enough to treat yourself to something better. Self-care, babe." But 2 days later, he ordered a $1 $200 espresso machine online and called it a necessary upgrade. I told myself these were quirks, not red flags. Love, I reasoned, was about compromise. Then, one Saturday morning, I found a color-coded spreadsheet on our shared laptop titled Monthly Household Contributions. It listed my name, every expense, and a column labeled Fair Share Expected. When I confronted him, he smiled like I was overreacting. "Transparency builds trust," he said. "Or control," I muttered. "Come on," he chuckled. "I make double what you do, and I'm not complaining. You're lucky I even split things evenly." It was the word lucky that stung. As months passed, his spending spiraled. He bought a new Tesla Model Y designer watches and even booked a $3,000 mindfulness retreat in Sedona for himself and his sister. Every 20th of the month, he'd sigh dramatically over his Amex bill and say, "Money just evaporates when you're successful." Meanwhile, he mocked my habits, how I packed lunch instead of ordering takeout, how I used coupons, how I refused to upgrade my perfectly fine phone. Then came that night. He'd just returned from Sedona, glowing from chakra realignment. I asked gently if maybe he should slow down on the spending. His credit card debt was mounting, and I worried about him. He looked at me with this smug half smile and said, "Oh, Martina, don't start. You're just jealous because I make more than you." For a moment I froze. Jealous. That word echoed in my mind like a door slamming shut. I could have argued, cried, defended myself, but I didn't. Instead, I took a slow sip of water, then said very evenly, "You're right." He blinked confused. "Excuse me." "I am jealous," I said, reaching for my phone. "Jealous that you think income equals worth." Then I opened my investment account, the one he didn't know about, and turned the screen toward him. The balance glowed in bold white numbers, 267,000. He leaned in, eyes narrowing. "What is that?" "My savings," I said. "Inheritance from my grandmother, plus what I've invested over the years. I've been living below my means since college." His jaw worked soundlessly for a second. Then, "You've been hiding this from me." "I wasn't hiding it," I said quietly. "You never asked if I had other assets. You just wanted to see my pay stubs." His voice rose. "We're building a future together. Don't you think I deserve to know?" "Deserved," I repeated, the word burning. "This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what's mine." He scoffed, pacing the room. "You've been freeloading off me while sitting on $250,000. I can't believe how manipulative that is." "Manipulative," I laughed softly. "I pay rent. I buy groceries. I pay for half our dates. You're the one who tracks my water usage." That's when his mask slipped. His voice dropped cold and bitter. "You think this makes you better than me? You think your grandma's pity money gives you power?" I just looked at him. "No, Larry. I think it gives me choices." He stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door so hard a picture fell from the wall. I sat alone in the living room, the glow of my phone still illuminating that balance. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel dependent. I felt dangerous. In the hallway, his muffled voice barked into his phone, probably to his sister or one of his buddies. "She's insane. Who hides money from their partner?" I smiled faintly. Let him spin whatever story he needed. I finally understood something crucial. Larry never wanted a girlfriend. He wanted a financial equal he could still control. And now the numbers were no longer on his side. I closed my laptop, walked to the window, and looked down at the city lights flickering like sparks from a burning wire. Men like Larry don't lose partners, I thought. They lose assets. The next morning, Larry acted as if nothing had happened. He made pancakes burnt, but proud of them, whistling, while the smell of overcooked batter filled the condo. He even poured me coffee sweetened exactly how I liked it, as though our entire argument the night before had been a bad dream. "Morning, partner," he said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've been thinking about what you showed me last night." Partner. That word made my stomach twist. I braced myself. He leaned forward, elbows on the counter. "We've got this incredible opportunity here, Martina. Between your savings and my income, we could really build something. Think long-term. Smart investments, maybe even a house." I blinked. A house. Yeah. He was already tapping numbers into his phone's calculator. "If you use your inheritance as a down payment, we can qualify for a great mortgage. With my earnings, it's perfect. Dual leverage. Dual leverage. Not love, not stability. Leverage." I set my coffee down slowly. "Larry, that money isn't for us. It's my safety net." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that's meant to sound patient but feels like condescension. "You don't need a safety net when you have me." That was when I realized he wasn't embarrassed about my savings, he was entitled to them. Over the next few days, Larry became the version of himself I'd fallen for in the beginning. Attentive, charming, generous. He cooked dinner twice, burned both times, started leaving little notes on my desk. "You inspire me. We're a team. Let's dream big." He even initiated affection again, touching me in ways that felt rehearsed, like he was following a manual for intimacy. It wasn't love, it was strategy. Then, one evening, I came home to find the lights dimmed, candles flickering, soft jazz playing from the speakers. On the dining table sat his laptop connected to the TV. "Sit," he said. "I made us a presentation." A presentation. He clicked to the first slide. The Mayfield Parker Financial Synergy Plan, a path to mutual growth. I swear my breath caught in disbelief. He actually had slides. Color-coded charts. Bullet points. Mortgage rates. Tax deduction breakdowns. He was explaining how my idle capital could be optimized by merging assets under his management. There was even a pie chart titled Projected Couple Net Worth by 2028. It was insane. When I didn't respond, he mistook my silence for awe. "You see, this is what power couples do. You bring liquidity. I bring strategy. Together, we're unstoppable." "Larry," I said carefully, "this sounds more like a merger than a relationship." He frowned. "You're being cynical again. I'm trying to plan our future." "Our future or your portfolio?" His expression hardened. "Wow, you really don't trust me, do you?" "No," I said, voice trembling with restraint. "I just know math." He slammed the laptop shut. "You're unbelievable. I'm offering to build a life with you, and you're treating it like a trap." "Because it feels like one." He stood up, towering over me, frustration twisting his features. "You're being dramatic. You've never understood how partnerships work. You think independence means secrecy." I met his gaze. "No, I think independence means peace." We stared at each other in silence. For a second, his eyes softened, like he was searching for the version of me that used to nod, smile, and agree. But she wasn't there anymore. He sighed, heavily changing tactics. "Listen, Martina, we could have everything people dream of. A house, financial security, maybe even a family one day. You can't do that alone." His words landed like a blade hidden in velvet. "You're right," I said finally. "I can't do that with you either." He blinked, caught off guard by my calmness. That night, he went to bed without another word. I stayed up, sitting on the balcony, the city lights reflecting off the wine in my glass. I should have felt triumphant for standing my ground, but instead I felt the quiet ache of someone realizing their love story had turned into a business negotiation. The next morning, I noticed something odd. My mail, which I always kept neatly stacked on my desk, had been moved. A few envelopes were slightly torn. One was missing entirely. When I asked, he smiled too quickly. "Oh, I just organized the bills. You're welcome." A chill ran through me. I didn't argue, but something inside me snapped into focus. That evening, I texted my best friend Lena, asking if her old roommate's lease offer still stood. It did. I started scanning listings on my phone under the table while Larry rambled on about long-term equity. I nodded at all the right moments, but my mind was already elsewhere, packing boxes, changing locks, deleting shared accounts. Love, I realized, wasn't supposed to feel like surveillance. It wasn't supposed to make you shrink every time someone said we. The night ended with Larry kissing my forehead and saying, "You'll see, Martina. This is for us. I smiled faintly. I know I said lying through my teeth. Then, in the privacy of my locked bathroom, I whispered to my reflection, love shouldn't feel like signing a contract you didn't read. The day everything truly fractured started quietly too quietly. I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Larry with takeout from his favorite Thai place. But as soon as I opened the door, I heard voices male, polite, uncertain, coming from the living room. She'll be fine with it, Larry was saying. When I stepped inside, a man in a navy suit looked up from the coffee table where several of my bank statements were spread out. Martina, Larry greeted too brightly. Perfect timing. The man smiled nervously. Hi. I'm Ryan, financial advisor from Wealth Partners. Larry said we'd be going over some of your investment documents. My what? Ryan's voice faltered. He told me you both agreed to start planning joint investments. He said you'd be running late, but I cut him off, turning to Larry. You went through my mail. Larry rolled his eyes. Don't be dramatic. I just pulled some information so we could get professional advice. We're building a life together, Martina. Isn't that what you want? You invaded my privacy, I snapped. Those are my accounts. Our future accounts, he corrected, his tone turning sharp. If we're going to build something real, there can't be secrets. Going through my mail is a felony, Larry. He laughed, actually laughed. Oh, come on. Stop acting like I committed a crime. I'm trying to secure our financial future. That's what responsible adults do. Ryan looked like he wanted to evaporate. I think I should go. Yes, you should, I said, without breaking eye contact with Larry. As soon as the door closed behind Ryan, Larry's calm facade cracked. You're embarrassing yourself. Do you realize how paranoid you sound? No, I said, voice low. I realize how controlled I've been. I turned toward my bedroom, but he followed. You're not walking away from this. Not after everything I've invested in us. Invested, I repeated, incredulous. You charge me rent and criticize my shampoo. He smirked bitterly. You'd be living in some shoebox apartment without me. I'd rather live in a shoebox than a spreadsheet, I shot back. His expression hardened. You're overreacting. You can't just pack up and leave because of a misunderstanding. Watch me. I grabbed my overnight bag and started throwing things into it, laptop, charger, wallet. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from clarity. He blocked the door. Don't do this, Martina. You'll regret it. I give you stability. I stared him dead in the eye. No, Larry. You give me anxiety. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt electric dangerous. Finally, he stepped aside with a mocking smile. Fine. Go. But don't forget you're technically a tenant here. You owe me 30 days' notice. I paused, then smiled faintly. I'll be gone in 3. You'll get the rest in writing. That made him flinch. He wasn't used to me being prepared. I walked toward the door, but his voice followed me, bitter and desperate. You think you can do better than me? I didn't turn around. I already am. Behind me, I heard the sound of glass shattering. When I looked back, he'd thrown a wine glass against the wall. Fragments glittered across the marble floor. You're destroying everything we built, he shouted. I took a slow breath. You built a cage and called it home. He froze, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression. Not anger, but fear. The kind people get when they realize their control is slipping. I walked to the guest bedroom, closed the door, and turned the lock. Then I opened the voice recorder app on my phone and hit record. The muffled thud of his pacing filled the silence on the other side of the door. I'll make your life hell, he muttered through the wood. Go ahead, I whispered to myself. I'm already in it. That night, he alternated between banging on the wall, texting apologies, and sending guilt-laced messages. You're throwing away everything. You'll regret this. We can fix it, Martina. Don't be stubborn. Each ping felt like static crawling under my skin. By midnight, the messages turned darker. You owe me rent. You used me. I'll tell everyone who you really are. I blocked his number and lay staring at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I met with a tenant lawyer during my lunch break. Her advice was simple. Document everything. Every text, every payment, every attempt to contact you. I went home that evening with a folder labeled evidence. Larry tried to act unfazed when I walked in casually sipping wine by the window, like a man who hadn't crossed 12 boundaries in one afternoon. Martina, he said smoothly, we should talk. I set the folder down on the table. We already did. You just didn't listen. He chuckled. You're being dramatic again. You think you can scare me with paperwork? No, I said quietly, but a restraining order might. He scoffed, looking away. You wouldn't. I looked right at him. Try me. Then I went to the second bedroom, the one he called the guest room, but I now thought of as temporary asylum. I locked the door, placed my phone on the nightstand, and whispered into the recorder again. Day 1. He's still pretending this is love. I lay there in the dark, the city humming outside, the faint smell of spilled wine drifting under the door. For the first time, I wasn't scared, just tired. When a man who thinks he owns you realizes he doesn't, that's when he becomes dangerous. And Larry Parker had just realized it. 3 days after I moved my essentials into the guest room, Larry declared war. Not openly with him, it was always more calculated than that. The Wi-Fi went out first. Then the streaming password stopped working. Then the hot water. I didn't confront him. I just wrote everything down. 10:18, Wi-Fi disabled without notice. 10:19, streaming accounts locked. 10:20, hot water off thermostat tampered with. I showered cold and smiled through gritted teeth. Documentation my lawyer had said was oxygen. By the 4th day, I received an email alert from my credit monitoring app. A new hard inquiry had been added to your file. My stomach dropped. I called the credit bureau, heart pounding. They told me a financial advisor, Ryan, from Wealth Partners, had run the report. I still had his business card. When I called him, his voice shook. Martina, I am so sorry. Larry said you'd authorized it. He sent over a scanned letter of consent with your signature and said you were too busy to confirm. My signature. Yes, it looked official, but now that you're calling God, I knew something felt off. I hung up, hands trembling. Larry hadn't just gone through my mail. He'd forged my signature. That night when he got home, I was waiting at the dining table, every document spread out before me. Screenshots, emails, timestamps. He froze in the doorway. What's all this? Evidence, I said. He laughed, the same condescending sound that used to make me feel small. You're unbelievable. I did all this for us. You stole my information, Larry. I borrowed it. For a good cause. You're impossible to help. I stood slowly. If you say one more word, I'll call the police. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You wouldn't. I held up my phone. Already did. He backed away, shaking his head. You're insane. No, I said softly. I'm prepared. The police came 20 minutes later. I didn't press charges that night. I just wanted a record on file. They told him to stay out of my space until the 30 days were up. He sneered the entire time, hands in pockets, pretending to be amused. But once the officers left, the performance dropped. He stood at the edge of the hallway, jaw tight, whispering through his teeth, You'll regret humiliating me. I've regretted loving you more, I said, shutting my door. The next week turned into psychological warfare. He started posting online cryptic captions about toxic women and financial abuse. His friends commented with sympathy emojis. Then a longer post. When someone hides hundreds of thousands from you but still makes you pay for groceries, who's the real manipulator? It got traction. The comments were brutal. I didn't reply. Not at first. But 2 days later, when his narrative began spreading among mutual friends, I decided to respond. Just one screenshot. Him, you should feel lucky I let you live here. Me, I pay rent every month. Him, rent doesn't cover emotional labor. I captioned it simply, transparency builds trust, right? Then I added a collage of his Venmo requests, $400 for emotional damage, $800, rent back pay, $3, $200, half of retreat. Within an hour, his post was deleted. Within 2, his sister DM'd me. I knew something was off. He told everyone you were broke, but you paid half our vacation. I'm sorry. I just replied, thank you. 2 nights later, my boss called me into his office. I braced for the worst, but instead he handed me a cup of tea and smiled wearily. I got a call from your boyfriend today, he said. He claimed you were mentally unstable and might be mismanaging payroll. My stomach turned. He leaned back. Luckily, my brother's a tenant lawyer. You might want to talk to him. That was how I met Erica Lynn, a lawyer who looked like she'd been waiting her whole life to dismantle men like Larry. After reading my notes, she smiled with professional delight. He changed the locks. Cut utilities. Used your personal data. Perfect. Constructive eviction, harassment, and identity theft. Let's make him regret his spreadsheets. She filed a formal complaint the next morning. By Friday, Wealth Partners' compliance department called me directly. They wanted every detail of the forged authorization. When I sent them screenshots and Ryan's emails, they said, Ms. Mayfield, this is serious. We'll be forwarding this to the district attorney. The next call I got wasn't from them. It was from Larry. Block number. Voicemail. You're ruining my life, Martina. I was trying to fix things. You don't have to do this. I deleted it. Then another came. You'll regret crossing me. I saved that one. Evidence. By the end of the week, the narrative had flipped completely. Someone, probably Ryan, leaked details about the identity theft to a mutual friend. Word spread fast. Larry's coworkers began whispering. His boss called him in. And suddenly, the man who prided himself on control was unraveling in public. I watched from a distance, not gleeful, just detached. That's when I realized something. When you take power away from a manipulator, they don't implode all at once. They deflate, slowly hissing like a punctured tire. He tried one last stunt, emailing me. "We can settle this privately. You don't have to destroy me," I replied. Transparency builds trust, remember. The night before I moved out, I sat on the floor of the empty guest room, surrounded by boxes and silence. My phone buzzed one last message from him. "I hope you're proud of yourself." I stared at it for a long moment before typing back. "I am, finally." I turned off my phone, took a deep breath, and for the first time in months felt air that didn't belong to him fill my lungs. He'd wanted to make me a cautionary tale. Instead, I'd become evidence. And evidence always wins. The morning I officially moved out of Larry's condo, the city sky was gray, a dull metallic kind of gray that matched the quiet in my chest. I handed the keys to the building manager, signed the last page of the notice letter, and walked away without looking back. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like breathing without permission. But Larry wasn't finished. 3 days after I left my lawyer, Erica called. Her voice was calm but firm. "The DA's office is moving forward with the identity theft investigation. The forged consent letter, the credit check, it's all traceable. They're calling it a probable felony." I didn't know whether to cry or exhale. He actually might face charges. "Martina," Erica said, "he will. He's already hired counsel. Do not respond to him directly if he contacts you again." I thanked her, then hung up and stared at my hands. They were shaking not with fear this time, but with the strange, fragile relief of someone who finally sees the door of the cage swing open. A week later, I got the call from building security. Larry had shown up at my office. He wasn't shouting or threatening. He was crying, holding a small box, my name written on it in blue marker. He said, "It's your stuff, the guard told me. We didn't let him in." Through the glass lobby window, I saw him. The man who once made me believe I was lucky to have him standing on the sidewalk with that box shoulders shaking. He stayed there for almost 2 hours. At one point, he even knelt down, covering his face with his hands. People walked past without stopping. I didn't go down. I couldn't. Later, my coworker Ava showed me a phone recording she'd taken from the window. For evidence, she said, half joking. In the video, Larry's sobs turned to calm, too calm. He pulled out his phone, muttered something, then straightened and walked away. The next morning, my mother called, voice trembling. "Martina, are you okay?" "Larry just called me. He said you're unstable, that you're scaring him, that you might hurt yourself." It took me an hour to calm her down, another hour to convince her I was safe. That was the moment I stopped feeling sorry for him. He hadn't shown up to apologize. He'd come to perform, to keep control of the story, even if it meant weaponizing my mother's fear. So I let go of restraint. With Erica's help, I filed for a restraining order, attaching the voicemails, forged documents, texts, and the video of his visit. The judge approved it within 48 hours, no contact within 500 feet of me, my work, or my new home. When the order was served, Larry's mask finally cracked in front of the court clerk. He screamed, "She ruined my life!" The clerk looked unimpressed. Then stopped contacting her. Weeks passed. My new apartment was small but quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't make you anxious. I bought cheap plants, a secondhand rug, a tiny espresso machine that made 1 cup at a time. I started therapy. My therapist asked me what I felt most guilty about. I said, ignoring the red flags because they were disguised as ambition. She smiled gently. Control and care can look very similar until you stop cooperating. That line stayed with me. I realized how early the signs had been there. The way Larry corrected me in conversations to sound smarter, the way he insisted on handling all restaurant payments for the points, the way he called me practical instead of beautiful. He'd been measuring my worth long before he measured my spending. Then came the update from Erica. "Good news," she said, sounding almost triumphant. His company conducted an internal review. He's been demoted, stripped of client access and commission bonuses. I let out a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. He'll hate that more than jail time. She chuckled. "You're probably right." We were also negotiating a settlement for constructive eviction and harassment. She said it would likely land around $15,000, almost poetic, considering that was roughly what Larry spent on luxury nonsense in a year. I agreed to the offer. Closure didn't have to roar. Sometimes it arrived as a quiet deposit notice. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across my balcony, I received an email from Ryan, the financial advisor Larry had dragged into the mess. He'd been fired, blacklisted actually, but he didn't sound bitter. "Hey Martina, I just wanted to thank you for handling all of this with grace. You didn't have to protect me, but you did. I'm moving to a smaller firm in a college town. Funny enough, I found a rental that's perfect for me. The landlord's a woman about your age who seems cool as hell. Wish you all the best." I smiled reading that. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I was that landlord. My grandmother's property, fully furnished, $400 a month. He'd find out soon enough. A few days later, Erica called again. He knows, doesn't he? She said, almost laughing. About what? Your tenant. Larry called. Ryan tried to warn him that you're vindictive. Ryan told him he's renting from you. I couldn't help it. I laughed until I cried. Poetic justice, I said. Poetic legality, she corrected. Even better. By the time autumn came, I'd stopped checking Larry's social media, but mutual friends told me he'd been posting motivational quotes about surviving betrayal. His captions were full of half-truths and self-pity. Some people pretend to love you while plotting your downfall. The comments weren't kind. People had seen the screenshots, the emails, the truth. And I didn't need to defend myself anymore. I wasn't his rebuttal, I was his lesson. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the rain hit the window. For months, I'd felt like the villain in someone else's story. But now I could see clearly I wasn't the villain. I was the evidence that manipulation dressed as love always collapses under its own weight. He once called me jealous. Maybe he was right. I am jealous of women who spot the warning signs before they confuse dominance with devotion. But jealousy fades, and peace that stays. By winter, everything had settled legally, emotionally, financially. My world was smaller now, but solid. And for the first time in years, my balance sheet wasn't just numbers. It was peace, space, quiet mornings. Larry, meanwhile, was unraveling in slow motion. Erica called to give me the final update. The DA's office officially filed the identity theft charge. His lawyer's trying to negotiate, but it's a felony on record, Martina. There's no version of this where he walks away clean. I didn't ask for updates after that. I didn't need to know how much further he'd fall, just that I'd stopped being dragged down with him. Still, it was impossible not to hear the echoes. Mutual friends whispered that he'd been demoted again after the charge went public. His company car was gone. The condo, his pride and joy, was on the market. Rumor said he'd moved back to his parents' house in the suburbs. The man who once lectured me about assets appreciating over time was now living in a guest bedroom, explaining to his mother why he couldn't make car payments. Poetic in a sad way. Meanwhile, I'd built something quiet but steady. My grandmother's rental property, the one Larry mocked me for keeping, was thriving. The new tenant, Ryan, had turned out to be a surprisingly good one. Reliable, polite, even sent me pictures of the backyard after fixing the patio lights. Sometimes I'd smile, thinking how strange life could be. The advisor who once helped Larry invade my finances now paid me rent. No revenge could ever feel neater. Then came the settlement notice. Larry's lawyer reached out, finally ready to talk. Erica handled it like a chess player who'd already checkmated 3 moves ago. The final number landed at $400 in damages. "Do you want to push for more?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I just want it closed." She smiled. "A clean ledger then." "Exactly." The day the settlement transferred, I treated myself to something modest but meaningful, a truck camper used, but in perfect condition. My therapist had suggested travel might help me reclaim my sense of freedom. So I did. I loaded the camper with my favorite things, coffee press, old books, my grandmother's quilt, and set off toward the mountains. As I drove, I thought about how Larry used to say, success means control. He never understood that true control wasn't about money or power or ownership. It was about walking away when someone tries to turn love into leverage. I parked by a lake at sunset. The reflection on the water looked like gold spilling over glass. I pulled out my phone, opened my investment app one last time. The number blinked back at me. $271,000. $4,000 more than the last time I'd checked. The market had risen quietly without permission like I had. I laughed softly. Guess growth happens when you stop forcing it. Later that evening, I got a text from Lena. Saw one of Larry's posts. He's quoting self-help books now about toxic women. He's still blaming you. I replied simply, let him. Then I turned my phone face down and watched the sky darken. Out here, away from the city noise and credit card bills and cold marble kitchens, I finally understood what my grandmother used to say. Money can buy freedom, but only if you stop trying to buy people. Larry never learned that, but I had. A week later, I received a thin envelope from the courthouse. Inside was a single sheet, restraining order extension approved 24 months. I folded it neatly, placed it in my drawer, and whispered to the empty room, I don't think I'll need it that long. Because people like Larry burn bright, but they burn fast. And once they run out of fuel, once there's no one left to feed their ego, they fade into the background noise of their own excuses. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. One last scene. I parked my camper at the overlook where the valley spread wide beneath a violet sky. The air smelled of pine and cold metal rain. I made coffee, leaned against the hood, and said aloud, half laughing, "Turns out living below your means and above your fears is the real wealth." And in that moment, it didn't feel like a quote or a lesson. It felt like the truest thing I'd ever said. Because freedom, when you've earned it, doesn't need witnesses. It just needs silence.